Welcome back, everyone. Time for another episode of Off the Hinges, the podcast where we explore things both inside and outside the arena. That's why we call it Off the Hinges, because the gate came off and things are scattered, and it's nobody's fault, but we're going to try and figure out and make some sense out of it. I want to start today by saying that my co-host is not with me. I got limited opportunity to interview this person that I've got with me as a guest today. I do want to give kind of a shout out to Addie, though, because while we've been away, Addie was elected homecoming queen, and so I'm proud of her and what she did. And we always talk about how we surround ourselves with people that we want to be like. So I'm anticipating being better looking almost any minute now. And we'll wait and see how that plays out. But to be more serious, today we've got a different deal. We're on the road. We're delivering a horse up to the Michigan border. And so this will sound a little different because when I'm not distracted, my thoughts are kind of sporadic. And now I'm distracted because I'm heading up and going through Chicago to get to Michigan. But we've got limited time, and I wanted to get this individual interviewed. He's been important in my life and a lot of other people's life in Illinois rodeo. I'm talking about Riley Olson. Riley's a Wyoming cowboy. The connection to Illinois as he ended up back here for some college type stuff. I'll let him tell you about that. But Riley did church services at back kind of in the time frame when Double G up in Sterling was having the high school rodeos and stuff. He was up there doing that. IPRA rodeoed with me a little bit and has been one of the founding members of the Warnock Waddies when we used to kind of travel across states in the Midwest and out west to do ranch rodeos. But anyhow, Riley, good to have you with us. What we ask to start with is a hot lap around the arena, kind of how you got started with horses and in the equine industry, what it did for you in rodeo, and kind of where you're at now. Just kind of a brief overview, and then we'll ask you some more in-depth questions. But thanks for taking the time to do this, Riley.
Yeah, well, it's great to be here with you, Matt. I appreciate the opportunity, and always good to just hang around you. And been a little while since we've been on a good road trip like this, so looking forward to having some fun here. But yeah, the horses have been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. My grandparents had a ranch up in northern Wyoming and the Worland area, and remember going on cattle drives with them, and I was still just spur and saddle blankets when I was on horseback then. But yeah, something about them just had always meant a lot to me. When I was in high school, got a little bit more into a little rodeo scene, got into bull riding a little bit, and wound up getting out of that, and until I came back out east to go to college, and ran in with you, and you got me talked back into getting on some bulls, and my life's never been the same, man. It's just, but no, horses have been a big part, and God's been a big part of my life, and it's for some reason those two things have always been connected, and for me, and so I went off to Bible college out here in Crown Point, Indiana, and then. And there was a time where I basically gave up anything to do with horses because I thought it was more important for me to dedicate my life to following God. But God gave all that back to me, and He's shown me that He wants me to follow Him and still be a part of the agriculture world and the horse world. And so whether it's been in the arena or out on ranches or training horses or riding broke horses, it's there's a connection there that's always kept me close to God, and so my roots were more into ranching, but got into training and a little bit of rodeo stuff, and it's been a really neat journey, but God continues to open up doors through horses for us to serve Him and just keep experiencing life.
Well, that's great, Riley. I know you said you're doing the training thing. You've got a group of mares and have a dedicated annual sale. every year now, and have switched brands here recently. But the ones with what we call the A-horn, or the brand on the hip,
right? Yeah.
There's a few of them around in the Illinois rodeo scene now. Dollar, my son, he rodeoed on one that has that brand. I've got a couple of myself, and Casey he's got one now, and there's a few others around. Mark Weber rides a bunch of them that got that brand. So when you see that this is the guy that has those horses, it'll look different moving forward. It's 3-bar brand now, just 3 straight bars stacked on top of each other. Same lineage of mares, more or less. They kind of rotate some different studs in and out, but kind of a guy that's trying to breed for big-footed, stout-boned, rodeo-type mentality horses.
Right.
And I've appreciated it, and it's been a success story for me, being able to ride some of those horses, and I've enjoyed it. I wanted to kind of start back a little bit and ask kind of a question that Addie would normally ask, and she would ask somebody like you that's got some years now of doing this in the equine industry. She always asks, what is it that you would give advice to a young person that's working with horses in the rodeo stuff? Like, what is advice that they could take, and just how they prepare and how they work? Advice that you were given kind of when you were getting young, something that you could share with the younger audience.
Yeah, I'll tell you, the first thing that comes to my mind is I remember when I was young and I was going around listening to different trainers and going to different clinics and learning more and more about horses, and one thing that always stuck out, I kept hearing guys say things like if I only knew then what I know now, I would have been much better off. And those were things that just pricked my ears, and I realized that I am, at that time I was at a young age, and I can know then what they knew now. And so it became very important to me to listen to people who've been down the road and had learned from their own mistakes and wish that they could go back and fix them when I was at an age where I didn't have to make those mistakes. And what it comes down to is really kind of pride. A lot of times it's hard for us to admit that we don't know something. And I went through a little bit of my life with the thought that I didn't want to look dumb, and I didn't want to look like I didn't know something. And I read a saying somewhere, and it really changed my life a little bit. There was a saying, and it said, ask a question once and look like a fool for a moment, or don't ask a question and look like a fool for your lifetime. And I realized that's how I was living my life, is I was just so afraid to look dumb, I didn't want to ask any questions. But the quicker you ask questions of things you don't know and admit that you don't know something, the quicker you are to learn things, and less likely to look like a fool in your life. And so learning is great. Being able to admit that you don't know something is key to learning. And so that's been a big thing in my life. Another thing that I would say is, when you work with somebody, when you go, whether it's a reining horse trainer or it's a roping horse trainer or just someone starting a colt somewhere, if you are working with them or you've gone to them for some help, do everything exactly like they do it, and figure out what it is that's working for them. And then when you go to someone else, do everything exactly like that person does it. And then after all the years have passed, you can look back and decide what of each of those things you can put together. We often think, well, another guy showed me a better way of doing it, so I'm just going to do it this way. But we miss out on what that person might be able to teach us if we don't do it 100% his way. So I would just encourage you guys that if you go learn from somebody, don't take other things that you've learned from other people with you and apply those. Take full advantage of learning from someone and do it exactly their way, and you can always look back and decide if you liked it or didn't like it, and change that up.
That is good advice, Riley. two different things there that you said. It's outstanding to get that advice at a young age. That's why I love doing this podcast and trying to get that information to young people. We're in a digital age, where podcasts are kind of all the rage right now, and rodeo families are a captive audience in the truck together. So
there you go.
It gives a chance for mom and dad, after they spend all the money putting trucks and trailers and horses together, to kind of corral the kids and be like, here's somebody that's had some success in this industry. We ought to listen to what he's got to say. So I appreciate that advice, Riley. One of the questions that I always ask, and I'll be interested to see from you because of the amount of horses that you've rode for people, really well-known stuff and studs that you've taken for people and worked through problems. For those of you that don't know, if the name sounds somewhat familiar, Riley's been in like Western Horsemen fairly regular. There was a point there, I think 1 year you were in, whether it was pictures or ads or something. I think me and my wife kept track. I think it was like every other month there was a picture of you in the Western Horsemen for something. But so I am interested to hear this, because you haven't just rode your string of horses. Some of us have had horses that we've liked and kept for 2 decades. You've been on horses repeatedly, like a revolving door for different people, and then your own stuff that you turn and sell or whatever.
Yeah.
So this question, I'll be interested to see how you answer. What is the favorite horse that you've ever rode, and why?
Oh man, that is a tough question to answer. There's so many things about horses that a guy can like. You have what you might refer to as big circle horses, and horses that can make the circle last all day long, never wear out on you, and they are worth their weight in gold in some situations, but they might not be really great inside a corral working and sorting something. But there are a few horses that stick out in my mind, and there's one horse, Matt, you actually had quite a bit to do with. And there was I remember I was working, riding a bunch of colts for a guy, and we went to help Bo and Melissa gather, and I brought I think he was a 3-year-old stud, and he was a driftwood bred horse, and I was riding him in an arena, and he just always seemed kind of lazy, but nice looking, big footed horse, and just big bone, and I asked you to ride him one day, and I think I told you that he was a little bit lazy, and you might have to keep him going, but I was doing almost all arena work at that time, and we got him out, and we were going to gather cows, I think up on Billy Creek, and man, I just really realized how much potential that horse had after you rode him, because he never did quit on you, and I rode him quite a bit after that day, and just really found that he had something a little extra special. He was a stud horse, and I wish I could have kept track of where he went after we had sold him, but that driftwood horse that you'll remember, big chestnut horse, he's one that always sticks out in my mind. There's another horse that I rode when I was working up in Montana, and he was a Gumbo Roni bred horse, and that horse was probably the easiest horse I've ever had to start in my life, and just from day one just acted like he was broke, and really because of that I've got a lot of our bloodlines that we run now. We run a lot of that Gumbo Roni because that horse made such an impression on me. So the amount of time I've spent on Gumbo Roni horses, I've been very, very pleased with them. And that was a horse that we called Zeus, and he was one of my favorite horses I've ever rode. I just had always liked that horse. So those two horses probably stick out in my mind a little more than others. I guess I'd have to give a little bit of credence to. I had an old horse. His registered name was Plains Dual Bar, and he was kind of a thirsty bred and Plains Gold Bar bred horse. And they're hard to find, but Jay Hawker Bar, I remember, was in his breeding, and I'll tell you, if anyone who hears this has any kind of link to those thirsty bloodlines or Jayhawk or Bar bloodlines, I'd be interested to visit with you, because I can't find much of that. But that was a horse that always impressed me too. He was just a gelding. We called him Henry, and that horse was probably the best horse I ever rode. But
what was the characteristics of him? That
he was probably a 15-1, 15-2, just kind of a big, strong horse. And you know, as the older I get, or more experience I get under me, there's two things I really look for in a horse, and one of them is willingness, and another one is attention. And I like a horse that pays attention, and I like a horse that's willing. And I just remember everything I ever put in front of that horse, he just would try, and I could never come across something that he wouldn't try to do, and he just always paid attention, and his attention was on me, his attention was on his job. He was kind of cowy, you know, he wasn't like a cutting horse cowy, but he was as cowy as I wanted to be, because he just would listen to me. I could put him on a cow, and if we wanted to cut back and forth, he would do that through my reins. He wouldn't do it necessarily all through instinct, but he just really would listen to me. If we go up any mountain and down any hillside and cross any river, I never could find something that he wouldn't do. He was the kind of horse that could make the big circles, and he was the kind of horse that could exceed in a corral too. But probably wasn't the absolute best at either one, but very, very willing to do anything I wanted to do, and had the athleticism to accomplish it too. So.
That's you hit on two things and your characteristics that I think that are important. You know, so many people look at color or their disposition, you know, whether they're nice to get along with, or, you know, even conformation to a point plays into this. Obviously you can't train conformation, but you can't train try either.
Yeah.
And you know, you can spend a lot of time working on a horse, and you just can't train try into them,
right,
or athleticism. And so that's where the breeding, you know, if you're going to spend that kind of time and money, I'm never one to write papers. I just don't care. I write geldings, and you know, as a general rule, I kind of got an idea about the horse before I get them anyhow. But I think where a guy has a breeding program like you do, that's where it pays off, because you at least got an idea if athleticism and try and conformation, you know, are in their background. Right. A little bit when you look at it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you know, we've sold a lot of weanlings and yearlings, and really the only way a guy can look at a horse and kind of see what he's built like and what he might have inside of him, but a lot of times the only thing we have to go by are those papers to know if, you know, what we're hoping to get out of a horse. And so I'm like you. Once you know what a horse is, papers are nothing after that, because he is just what he is. But the papers do tell you a lot about the possibility of potential in a horse. So it's good to get to know those papers a lot.
I haven't asked this of other people, but I just kind of thought of it now. In your recollection, by today's standards and what people know and stuff, what is probably the best bred horse that you ever swung a leg over?
You know, that'll be a hard one for me to answer, because I've been around a lot more ranch horses, and the hybrid stuff I have, you know, I'll tell you, when I went off to Bible college, I left horses for almost 6 years, and really left the scene of it, didn't keep up with anything, and it kind of put me out of the loop on some of that stuff for a while, and definitely I'm getting back into it now with the understanding. But there's a lot of really hybrid horses out there that I've never had the opportunity to ride and things, and so my personal best would be different than other people's. You know, there's for instance, one thing that I see, or there's a bunch of these metallic cat horses out there, and as I look at that and I see how many are out there and how many are winning a lot of money and just doing so well, and I think a lot of it's because they are so rideable and so trainable. They're a little smaller horse, but there's a lot of people. A lot of people get along with those horses, and that speaks pretty highly of them, I think. I personally haven't got to ride any of those, but I've rode some of the Doc's Hickory and the Highbrow Cats, which Metallic Cat's the son of Highbrow Cat, but that is one of the hottest lines going, and I think they are just so people friendly. But yet you have to be able to ride them at the same time. But a lot of amateurs, I think, are getting along with them really well. So there's some really, really cool bloodlines out there that I haven't got to be a part of. My experience has been with a little bit of an older lines, and so yeah, I coming from the big country where we rode a lot of big strong horses, the Hancocks and the Driftwoods, and some of the Two-Eyed Jacks and those things. I've got along really good with those. The Two-Eyed Red Bucks, I've rode a few of those that I've been really impressed with. But I'll tell you one thing we do is we run a bunch of cutter bill horses, which I have to say my opinion on those have been that they are not the best at anything, but they are good at a lot of things. But what have impressed me so much about them is they have been extremely trainable. We of course have a program where we teach young kids how to train horses, and I have not come across any bloodlines that have been as forgiving as those cutter bill bloodlines have been. And it's funny, that's a trait or a terminology I've never considered in a horse before, but the trait of forgiveness has become huge in my life when it comes to horses, because you get a kid on a horse and he's going to make a lot of mistakes, and if that horse will forgive those mistakes and say, okay, you got it wrong, try again, that means a lot with these kids. But you get a horse that might be a super athlete and extremely capable of accomplishing great things, but you mess up once with them and you're done, and there's no forgiveness there. They can be a little tougher to get along with when for a kid or someone who's green and just learning, so they don't give you a lot of chances sometimes. But those cutter bills have been extremely forgiving, and so I've appreciated that, and I'll continue to keep those in our bloodlines for sure.
Forgiving horses is kind of the name of the game for me, Riley. So.
Yeah,
I know exactly what you're talking about, for sure. There's everybody talks about how they ride horses, and by and large, until you're around somebody that that has dedicated the time that you have, and there's some natural talent that's given by God.
Sure.
To be able to ride horses. Most people just sit on horses. It's a tool that kind of goes where they need to go, and to classify it as riding, I think, is maybe an overstatement. So if you use that as the realization that most people are just sitting on them, you better have a horse that's forgiving. Because we're going to make mistakes and ask them to do dumb stuff, and that they shouldn't have to, and especially guys that shag bulls and pick up and stuff like that. Those horses got to get kicked and hooked on every once in a while. If you try not to get in that situation, but most anybody that's done it very long has had a kind of a brain seize and got themselves in a spot where they got their horse in trouble.
Yeah.
And if every time that happened, our horse never wanted to go in the arena again, we would be buying horses pretty rapidly. So the forgiveness is another big thing that plays in with kind of those other aspects that we looked at. It makes me think when maybe me and you first were together and didn't really even know each other. You were on one side of the Platte River and I was on the other, but I rode probably the top horse in my string at that time was a horse I called Peaches. And she was not forgiving at all, but super super easy to get along with. And the reason I say that is, you remember on that Platte River there was islands and stuff, we'd have to go get baby calves off the islands or whatever. She would pack a baby calf back through that ice water and back over onto the feed ground or whatever and get it back with its mama, and then you'd set the calf down and do whatever you need to do, step back on her, and she would break in two. It was the same way if she had to give kid rides or whatever it was. She always was perfect when you needed her to do that, but she would always let you know that this is not really my job description. After the day she died, she was that way. I mean, never did get over that.
Yeah.
She was honest about it. It wasn't like it was that big of a deal, and I don't think she did buck me off one time, actually, but that wasn't, it might have been her daughter. I had a daughter that was Little Peaches.
Oh, yeah.
And I think maybe the daughter is the one that bucked me off.
Yeah.
And so that tells you how little they actually bucked. But she would buck enough to let you know that she was not the kids' horse after. But never, ever give you any trouble when you're right in the middle of a rack or needed to do something.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
With a kid or with a baby calf or whatever the case may be. And so I appreciate that type of attitude out of a horse. I would rather they didn't. We could just all assume, and I'd be happy to without a bucking when I got back on. But that's the way she was, and she was probably the last of her and her daughter. I don't think I've really had a whole lot of mares since then, but I was always impressed with her. I mean, we're delivering a mare right now that was at my house for about 6 hours, and that's about 6 hours longer than I like having a mare at my house.
Yeah.
But I always kind of beat on mares, but they are dirty tough, a lot of the time.
Yes, they are.
And I think I miss that part of it just because I don't ever have them around. That some of the mares can be so good, and people discredit them, and and will overlook a good horse because they don't want to take the time to kind of deal with some of the stuff that you got to deal with a mare. And if you're a young family and and don't have gobs of money to go spend on a seasoned gelding, you can save $1 or $2 and run mares. I've got people that I know, even in my own family, that ran mares exclusively and then didn't have the problems that come from it. And I think there's a way to kind of help your kids or help yourself out a little bit by not automatically discrediting mares and not even giving them the second look.
Yeah, for sure. It is true. I mean, there's a little bit of a problem when you're running mares and geldings together, but boy, good mares got a lot of grit, and you might be able to get into one for a little better price, like you said, and you'll have a little more of an edge too on competition, because they really do compete well, and so a guy can. Some of the best horses that you'll ever ride will be mares if you give them a chance. They're pretty good horses. But,
one of the other questions that I always ask too, and this is kind of a personal hatred probably for you as much as you dislike stuff, but I always ask, what is the favorite truck and trailer that you've run around with? Everybody's had trucks that were good for them or dependable, or trailers or whatever. You personally have always kind of hated the mechanics side of stuff, and out of necessity, I think, made yourself better at it, but I don't know that you ever really wanted to.
Yeah.
But you have gone back and forth. I mean, like today, this is like your life. That's why we're doing a rolling interview right now, is because you are constantly on the go, it seems like. And so I wanted to ask you that question, even though you're not probably as into the trucks and trailers as a lot of rodeo dads would be, but you've got experience. So I wanted to kind of ask you that and just see what you had to say about it.
Yeah, well, you're right. I'm not much on turning wrenches. I've learned how to do a few things on my own, and I keep my mechanic friends very close to me, like you, and but I'll tell you, I always liked Fords and Dodges, especially the early years. The old 5.9s were really, really hard to beat. Put lots and lots of miles on them, and they were ones I felt almost comfortable even working on. And when I was younger, I always thought I hated Chevys and those kind of deals, but I hate to admit it, but probably the best truck I ever had was that GMC Duramax that you remember, that I think had the old LB7 engine in it, and I still have it actually, but that pickup probably was my best truck I'd ever had. I got along. It wasn't horrible to work on. It was it really ran.
We did
good.
get to work on it.
We did get to work on it. Yeah, we had to put some injectors in it twice, I guess. But yeah, I think that was a common problem on those. But it, man, it ran pretty good. I had an 01 Cummins that I really got along with. I'm running a 17 Ram right now with the Cummins in it, and it's got less than 100,000 on it, and I've gotten along really well with it. The turbo went out early on, but they replaced that. That was some glitchy deal there. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know enough about the mechanic inside of stuff. But for some reason, I've always seemed to have Dodges and Rams, and so other than that GMC, and I've liked that GMC quite a bit, but I don't feel real qualified to answer that question, to tell you the truth. So
You, what about, and you're not into the big fancy living quarters trailers and stuff, but you've pulled a lot of trailers.
yeah.
What about as far as just like ranching out of stock trailer, hauling cattle? You've had, several different brands and stuff like that. Is there anything that you particularly did like or didn't like, or?
Yeah. I'm pulling around an aluminum trailer right now, and they're great on the highway. I'm not a big fan of them just in normal ranch work. I really like a good steel trailer and running around the ranch with and things. So they do get a little heavy, I guess, but they're in Missouri, and we're real close to the Kodiak trailer manufacturing place, and they're kind of part of Coos also, or they were part of the same family somehow, and they've made some pretty good trailers. I think right now the best trailer I've got to beat around and pull a little bit was one that my cousin had, and it was a GR. I really liked how that trailer was put together, and I didn't get a lot of experience with it, but that's, if I were to buy a new trailer right now, that's definitely the direction I would look at going.
Do you know where they're out of?
I think Oklahoma.
Oklahoma.
I believe so.
And it's Joy or GR, like George Robert.
Right. Yep. Yeah,
Are they kind of a punchy type trailer that they build?
They can be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. They make bar tops, and they make they make a few different styles, but yeah, I think they're pretty good. There's I was working for the ID down in Wyoming a long time ago. They ran a trailer. I always liked it, and I don't know if they even make them anymore, but it was called a horse shuttle, and I haven't seen one for years, but that trailer kind of sticks out in my mind too. Really enjoyed it. Liked how that trailer was set up, but yeah.
I haven't asked a lot of people this, Riley, but in fact, I don't remember, and I don't know why I haven't, because I probably should, but I'm going to ask you it, and then I'll go back to kind of some traditional, just because I know you fairly well, and so I'm curious to see which of several that you would use. But what was probably the worst horse wreck you've ever been in? And what was the scenario?
And that's always relative to people who are in the wreck, I guess, because the worst horse wreck I personally was ever in was, golly, I guess there was two of them that really stick out in my mind. The one, we were in Montana, and we were out gathering a bunch. We were looking for some cows that we were missing, and I got sent over a hill to check a old water tank that was over there, and pretty drouthy year. Water tables were down, and got to this tank, and it had pretty low, but it was hot day, so I tried to step my horse down there, and he kind of wound up falling into it, and he got in and found out he couldn't swim. And I've always liked being on top of horse and water, because horses can swim, and I really don't swim well, and so as long as I'm with a horse, I'm good. But when I found that horse couldn't swim, we both panicked. And long story short, I wound up trying. I had all my chaps and gear on, and I tried to swim. he was sinking and I was trying to get to the other end of it. And he turned around and got back on top of me and kept me under him for a little while. And I am sure that was the closest I've ever been to death. It was a very odd feeling where I felt like I actually quit panicking and everything got really calm. I realized how great it was to know who my Savior was, and I knew where I was going, and it was a strange time for me. And somehow I was able to get back on top of the horse, and we got out of it all right. But that was, for me, that was the scariest wreck I've ever been in, and the closest I would say I'd ever been to death. And water has always scared me, so that didn't help any. But the other thing that happened when I was in Bible college, I was riding some colts for some people trying to pay my bills, and there's no open country where I was at, and so I was just riding down the road, and I had a pickup truck hit me from behind, and he was doing 55 miles an hour, and smoked me, tore the back legs off my horse, and I wound up 60 feet from where he hit us, and the horse of course died, and it was a bad wreck. By grace of God, I got out of it unscathed, but so those were probably my two worst wrecks. For me, they were, but I don't really know exactly. I can't blame the horse. Well, the first horse, I don't know why he couldn't swim. I'd never been on a horse that couldn't swim, but man, he couldn't swim to save his life, and the other horse, she didn't do anything wrong. Just we were walking down the road and got hit by a pickup. So yeah, they were both interesting scenarios.
I was around obviously for the one and not for the first one, but
yeah.
That's a scary thing, and that you see so much of it with people taking off on horses, and it's just a different day that we live in. I mean, it's scary enough to be in an armored vehicle on the road with people, texting and driving,
right,
and eating, and they're Bluetooth to this and connected to that, and got laptop holders, they're doing everything but paying attention to their surroundings. I had kind of a close call on the colt this week. I guess I told you about with the school bus pulling in, about run over me in my own driveway.
Yeah.
They just, people just don't savvy horse stuff anymore, as a general rule, that,
yeah, you're right.
Where they give you a little bit of grace in birth or anything, I don't know if they just think that every horse is, a Chicago carriage horse or whatever, that, is completely trained and done, or why that is. But we have a lot of kids that love to just jump on horses bareback and ride around, even at the fairgrounds or wherever we're at. And it is something that you need to think about.
Yeah.
Because, you may be able to ride your horse like crazy, but you ain't going to ride them past a 55-mile-an-hour vehicle that's going to run you down.
That's exactly right, yeah. Yeah, we're getting more and more removed from people thinking agriculturally, and they don't, people look more at horses like it's just a four-wheeler or a motorcycle, and they don't realize the effect that a vehicle or even their own presence will have on an animal, and especially a young horse, and so they don't think about those things. That's for sure. So now it's on us to think about that and be watching for people coming. But it'd be good to educate the public again on how animals react to different pressures around them.
I asked you about the low. Let me ask you about the high. And then not just rodeo-wise or anything, but kind of in equine, favorite experience you ever had with a horse, whether it was up on some scenic overlook or, being able to run something down or get something caught or, just a chance to kind of brag on yourself, or I got to be, here at this point, through some hard work or through God's grace or aligning things for me or whatever.
Yeah, I would say I worked in Billings, just outside of Billings, Montana, for back early 2000 for a guy named Jim Leachman, and hairpin calving, and that was probably one of the most enjoyable experiences for me, because I was riding all his colts, and we were out. He ran 150 brood mares, and we ran horses like we run cows, and one morning we took out to move 150 mares, and we had to take them, it was 8 or 10 miles, and it had snowed, and it was just powder all across the prairie there, and up the hills. And I just there was only two of us. We'd keep one guy in front and one guy in back, and just taking that string of horses out and just seeing them line out, and we were breaking the powder up, and it was just such a pretty morning. You know how it can be up in that country with blue skies, the sun's crisp, it's only like 5 degrees out, but it doesn't feel that cold, and it was just one of those mornings. And running a whole bunch of horses, that morning will forever stick out in my mind as one of the great days. Also there, I remember there was a gray horse that was a stud horse, and they given to me to ride in my string. He was a 5-year-old, and talked about how much trouble he was, and how he bucked a little, but it was more, he didn't really buck too bad, but he just had a lot of attitude issues, and they just wanted me to try to knock some of the edges off of him, and they were going to geld him and just be rid of him. And man, I remember just working with that horse and just turned him loose in the round pen, took everything off of him, and just started moving around, and got to where I could, made him with nothing on his head. I just kept messing with him until I could trim his feet with nothing on his head, and I can saddle him with nothing on his head, and just kind of took him from a different approach. And that horse turned the corner so much and became such a good horse that I remember that year he wound up being the high selling horse at Jim Leachman's sale, and that just was one of those years that was just really, really cool. And that horse became it was just a really good horse, and just turned the corner like I'd never seen a horse turn a corner before. That was a pretty rewarding experience too. So a lot of good things happened on the Leachman place for me. I enjoyed my time there, and rode a bunch of good horses there.
That's neat. I want to ask you, because that was kind of you were right out of part of the equestrian part of your college career, weren't you? Right. When that happened. I mean, the main thing, obviously, I mean, I don't even have to ask you to know this, is you can't ride horses, or you can't sit on horses. You got to be able to ride horses if you're going to get an opportunity like that. Yeah. And you got to have some natural talent to do it. I mean, everybody doesn't get to do it. I wish, that I had even an inkling of it, but I don't. And it's just, everybody's given different gifts. And you were obviously given that one. So that, with that being said, how do you put yourself as a young man, like these kids that are coming out of high school, college and stuff, in a position to where you can go ride horses for what's probably arguably one of the top 5 strings in the nation? I would say, that the hairpin cavvy was kind of that well known. I mean, there's people talk about 4.6s or what, those type of, I mean, that's what the hairpin cavvy is. I mean, you come right out of college and you're riding these horses for this guy. Now, obviously, natural talent played in, but how else did you position yourself to be in that opportunity to do that?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, I remember sitting with Jim Leachman, and he threw a notebook in front of me, and it was probably 3 inches thick of papers, and he said, "These are all applications." And he says, "I don't know what it is about you." He said, "But I like you." And he said, "And I called the references that you'd given me in your application." And he says, "I really liked what your references told me." And so I'll tell you, I think today's day and age is almost easier for people to get jobs. I remember when I was, at that stage, you didn't, everybody would show up for work. So that was, you had to show up, and you had to be good. And
that's true.
Now, all you got to do is show up, and you outclass 90% of the people anymore, it seems like. But I'll tell you, I think what I learned during those times is your reputation means a great deal. And there was, even Jim Leachman at that time told me, he says, everybody in this book is more qualified than you. He said, "But I like what your references told me, and there's something about that, and I just want to give you a try." And I really believe it was God's provision for me. I don't know why he gave me that shot. I really shouldn't have got. I didn't have the experience that I needed for that job. but I did have a lot of try and a lot of desire. And one thing I worry about our generation now, the young men in our generation, the young people is they expect lots of wages, lots of benefits, but if you are willing to work for nothing, the first place I went to work for to learn anything about horses, I paid them to let me work there. And I just, how bad do you want the experience? How bad do you want to learn what you want to learn? And you have to be willing to work for next to nothing, and go through the hard spots in life, and then maintain a good attitude the whole time, and maintain a good work ethic. So when you leave there and you go to the next place, someone calls your old boss back, and they beg your prospective employer to send you back to them. And I'll tell you another thing about Jim Leachman that I don't know if he did it as a test or what it was, but I remember the place I was working at before I went to Jim's place, they had a stud horse that Jim Leachman really wanted, and he asked me to talk to the people about buying the horse, and he said, would you tell them that you're buying it so they'll give you a better deal, and then I'll give you the money for it. And I told him right off the bat, I said I won't do that. No, I said, I'm not. I said, these are good people, whether they're good people or not good people. I said, I'm not going to lie to them about that. And I don't know if that had anything to do with him hiring me or not, but he referenced that a couple of times to me, that he appreciated honesty and that kind of stuff.
Boy,
so,
a deal like that can sort some people out in the horse world.
Yeah,
oh, man. There's so many that would fail that test in the equine industry.
I thought for
taking
sure,
a chance to be with somebody like him.
Yeah, I really thought for sure he wasn't going to hire me after that, but I think it made an impression. So yeah, your reputation, I found, meant a lot. So be careful how you leave jobs. Be careful how you there's no perfect boss or no perfect workplace, but just work hard, be diligent, and try to see things from other people's point of view, and if you can leave, try to leave every job with an open opportunity to come back, and I think you'll open up great opportunities for you in the future for sure.
Well, you said something, Riley, that I want to trap you in and kind of transition and close here. You said there's no perfect boss, but you were out there and you were doing that, and arguably, that's at a young age at the top, when that happens. And like I said before, you're in the magazines and that type of stuff's happening. But then something changed and you did get a chance to go work for the perfect boss.
Right.
So let's close with that. You tell me how you transition from everything that you had into what you do now.
Yeah. Well, of course, the perfect boss being our Lord and Savior, and that's I grew up in a Christian home, and shortly before I almost drowned on that horse, actually, I was in a church service, and I had been I'd been listening to a guy had come in, and he taught us about what had happened in his life, and he was actually involved in some rock music kind of stuff, and he talked about how he gave up his life, that old life, to serve God, and how much of a hold his life had on him, and he had to give it up for the Lord. And I remember going back to my little bunkhouse there and giving my life to the Lord. I was saved, and I loved the Lord. I went to church, and I was faithful about reading my Bible and things, but I realized that I never gave my life to God, and I had told God that if He ever wanted me to leave the whole horse and ranching scene, that I was willing to do it, and I was sincere about it. And there's part of me that hoped it wouldn't happen, but I was sincere that I would do it. And that was shortly before I'd almost been in that drowning accident, and then after that, I really realized how precious life is, and I realized that I wanted to make a difference if God would let me. And then while I was working for, or right after I got done working for Jim Leachman, actually, I was in another church service, and I just felt, there's no audible voice, but I just felt like God wanted. It was just like He was saying, "Okay, it's time," and so I just dropped everything, went to Bible college, and you're right, I had the chance now to work for the perfect boss, and everything that I do with horses is now geared towards the service of people and to serve our Lord and Savior, to open up doors, to present the gospel, to help people get through hardships and hard times. Horses have an amazing ability to do that, and so now I get to work with horses every day, but it's not because of a love of a horse that I'm working with them like it used to be. Now it's because of a love of my God that I get to work with them, and so that's been incredible. And I think that's what makes it easier, because even when the Bible says to do all things as unto the Lord. And I was saved when I was working for all these other guys, and I had some great bosses, and they weren't, like I said, they weren't perfect. There's no such thing as a perfect boss. But when those times of imperfection and struggles come, if you will reflect on the idea that you do all things as unto the Lord, you realize in the big picture you're working for the perfect boss, and so you can forgive the struggles that come with our human bosses, and you can look past that, and we just have to rest in God and realize that He's the one that's in control of everything. So we'll all have our bad days, but thankfully God never has a bad day. God never forgets anything. God never struggles. He's always perfect. He's always there, and He's never made a mistake when it comes to your life or mine.
Tell me about your physical location and your ministry, what that looks like right now, and kind of, what you're anticipating over the next couple of years.
Yeah, you bet. Well, we're in Stockton, Missouri, and, I've been there now almost 12 years, and it's been, we were part of what was called the Agape Ranch at the time, and those are the horses that, as you had mentioned earlier, have the Ahorn brand on their left hip. We still run the same kind of horses, but we have transitioned to the 3-bar brand, and our ministry now is called Ride Prosperously Ministries. It's we just call it RPM Ranch. Of course, the RPM standing for Ride Prosperously Ministries, and we're there in Stockton, Missouri. And our goal is to
let me interrupt you just a little bit. The transition is you're at the helm kind of now. That's
correct.
It's your vision, your ministry, as opposed to what it was before. You bought property, bought the rodeo grounds and the bleachers and the horse sale facility and all of that stuff, and so now it's kind of what God has got on your heart.
Yep, you're exactly right, Matt. I'm glad you brought that up, because I was working for the Agape Ranch there and enjoyed everything, and we had some great times. But as we were doing that, God I think He'd been training me and preparing me, and then they had wound up shutting down, and we were able to purchase some of the land and some of the horses, and it came with all of the equine facilities there. And so now God's laid on my heart a different burden, similar but different, and that burden is for young men. I believe young men have been the most mislabeled and misunderstood part of our society now for several years, and they're confused. They don't know what it's like to be a man. They don't know if they should be masculine. They don't know if they should be strong, and the world tells them no, but something inside that God put in them tells them yes, and I think they're very confused, and so that's a group of people we want to reach. We want to help. We want to teach them to be leaders again. You read throughout the Bible teaches that the whole theme of the Bible is God has instructed men to lead, and that's you can't deny that as you look through the Bible, and so we've dropped the ball a lot. A lot of our young men aren't leading like they should be, and so our goal is to use horses to help men lead. There's no better leadership than servant leadership. And if 150 or a 200-pound man is going to lead a 1,200-pound horse, it really has to be through servant leadership if you're going to do it well. And so to learn those principles that are taught in the Bible, to try to strengthen and build confidence in young men and help them be compassionate again, and to walk with purpose, and to be better husbands, better fathers in the future. I believe America needs that. I believe that America will be so much better if our husbands and fathers were doing a better job. And so we want to train up the next generation to be those husbands and fathers that they need to be.
It's exciting for me, Riley. Like I said, there's already some horses around in the rodeo world. Kurt Bogner's been down there. Josh Phillips has rode with you, when we were branding out west and stuff like that. Cooper Langston, who graduated last year, he come down for a clinic that you had down there this summer. The more I can get people around you and those type of horses, everybody wins in that scenario. We got to have horses because we want to rodeo, or be in the equine industry. And by and large, as a general rule, if we can spend our money with an honest person instead of a horse trader that's the opposite of what you are, you're winning, because at least your money's going to something that's not, further and some kind of shady business deal. You have the most unique horse sale once a year. I want you to talk about that quick, and I want you to tell us why it's unique. And I think you understand where I'm going with this, and when it is, what you're going to have to offer, what you see offered this year coming up.
Yeah, you bet. Well, we do put on a horse sale every year. It's called the Ride Prosperously Production Sale. Typically that sale is right towards the end of August. We try to, as we work with our young men through the summer, we try to make sure they can get back to school and finish up our horse business there just at the end of summer. So that's where we're looking. So it'll be right there that third weekend in August, just hopefully before everyone gets back into school. But there's so what we do is we use the horses, like I said, to help teach these young men character traits and leadership traits, and when it's all said and done, we feel like we got the good out of our horses, and now it's just time for us to allow the young men to show off their skills, to show off all the hard work that they've done. And we put these horses in our production sale, and we have a futurity every year for people who they buy our horses. They're allowed to come back bring these horses back as 3 and 4 year olds to enter our futurity. We give away $10,000 in that futurity, so they have a chance to win back the money that they've put into their horses. And but some of the unique things that we have about our sale is, thankfully, God gives us the good of these horses in what our boys get out of them. And so anything that we get out of a horse after that is purely profit, whether that's $5 or $5,000. We're good. So one big thing that about our sale is we have a no reserve sale. Every horse sells no matter what it brings, and so that there's no such thing as a ghost bidder or a house bidder or any type of reserve price. The people who come to our sale, they get to tell us what they think the horses are worth, and we believe them, and we just sell them whatever they bring. So we try to make sure to represent our horses as fairly and openly as we can. We don't. One thing we say, the only surprises we like people to have are good surprises. We'd rather them think that they aren't as good as they are, and then get home and realize that they're better than they thought they were, than to have it the other way. So
that's where I was driving. I mean, you have the most honest representation of your horses, that you're going to find at a sale, period.
Yeah.
I mean, it like hard on your stuff going into the sale, like you said, you want them to have a good experience when they get the horse home. and be surprised, well, he has, grabbed himself a time or two when we pulled the cinch and they get him home and he doesn't, grab himself anymore than the other way around. And it is, for 10 years, has been the most honest represented horses I've seen sell.
Yeah, well, thanks, Matt. I appreciate that. It is and it's by the grace of God, because we have to rely on our horse sale to help pay our bills and feed the horses, buy hay again, and all of those things. But that's one of the greatest things, like we talked a little bit ago about working for the perfect boss. Is I feel like that's how he wants us to run that, and if the horses don't bring enough money, well, my boss is going to provide the rest somehow, and that's what we rely on. And I totally get it, though. You have the pressures of getting the bills paid and doing things, and you want to make sure your horses sell for as much as they can. Boy, I understand that point of view, and I get why it's so easy to fall into overselling your stuff, I guess. But due to the ministry that we're in, I get the rare opportunity to just feel like our horses, that what we've got out of them they've paid their way. So now we just get to sell them for whatever they get to sell for, and we don't even worry about it at that point. And so, we let God pay our bills, and He does that through people, through churches, through our horse sale. I don't even know how they get paid sometimes, but they get paid, and that our ranch and our whole focus is not income, but rather outcome, I guess you could say. And so we look forward to it, and we're glad to have the sale, and I think people do appreciate it, but we're definitely wanting people to get a good experience with our horses. Our horses, our boys ride the horses. They're green. They don't know a lot, and so the horses aren't always as well trained as they should be. They're not always as sharp. They're going to be hard in the face, and they're the biggest thing we try to accomplish is try to not let bad habits happen, and then we let the professionals take it from there after they buy horses from us. And so I can't expect people to come and pay a huge amount of money, or be disappointed if they don't pay a huge amount of money for horses that are trained by inexperienced hands. And so, but our horses see a lot. We put them through the works, and so they're a good bunch of colts, generally speaking. But
your reputation is starting to drive price. I think there's repeat buyers. I mean, I don't know how many people I'm asking you to guess here. I'm not going to hold you to it but how many people at this year's sale do you think had bought from you before?
Oh,
if you had to put a percentage to it.
Yeah, geez, 60% easy. Maybe a little stronger than that. You're right. We do get a lot of the repeat buyers, and which is great. In some ways, I'm really happy about that, for sure. I do wish we could get some, and I think as the word gets out, we'll get more and more people coming in. But yeah, we have found that the people who bought our horses before feel like they know where they can come get horses again. So yeah, I'd say at least 60% of our buyers this year were repeat buyers.
Yeah, just from me being down there, it seems like I recognize a lot of faces, that are down there buying over and over and over again, year after year, and taking them and knowing that they can go on, and whether they're just turning them again to somebody and finishing them, or whether they're, lifetime hang-oners, Dollar's gray horse that he's got, we've had for so long, either way, it's a great opportunity. I'm glad that I got to be involved in it. My involvement with you, obviously we knew each other in Wyoming, but then when you come back to Indiana, I was just amazed that somebody with the talent you had would walk away from it to go serve God. And we talked, obviously you were a fish out of water when you went to,
Right.
we call anything north of 39, Casey will get mad at, or north of 80, Casey will get mad at us about this, but if you're north of 80, you're in Chicago, so so if you live at where you lived and where your parents place was and stuff like that, to go to Chicago is just it's to go there, and to go there because you knew it was going to be hard and it was going to be a good, strict, Bible college type of thing, and you didn't want some wishy-washy, just a diploma to tack up on your wall. I respect that in you, but I knew in my heart there was no way God gave you the talent. I've been around horse people my whole life, from early, coming home from the hospital till now, been around horse people, and people just don't have the talent you have. I mean, that's just the best way to say it. I've seen people do great things on horses that still didn't have the talent that you have. They're just able to get with a horse to get a job done. To have talent to kind of almost morph into them and be able to think about what the horse is thinking about, it's a gift. That's all I can say. And I always said, and you can back me up on this, if I said it once, I said it 1,000 times, I don't believe there's any way God would give you that gift to have you not use it anymore. I believe there's a way that he's going to have you use it in the ministry, to do it. So few people get it. And so I have always been glad that you've done what you've done, and tried to support you where I could. I fell short, a lot of the time, especially here recently. It's bothered me how busy I've been in my own stuff when you're trying to get going. And it's been convicting to me, to watch how much worldly stuff I get wrapped up in, that would keep me from serving. So anyhow, it's the woke culture in today's world robs us of a lot of things, and they try and take the rainbow away from us and God's promise, and the word partner, they've tried to take that away. And me and you've been partners for 2 decades now, going on, and I don't care whether they think it's funny or not. I'm glad to have you as a partner. This podcast is kind of named aptly for the off the hinges deal, is the people that you want around you, when that gate comes off the hinges. And if we're picking teams, you ain't gonna be standing there very long waiting for me to call your name to have you on my team when it comes off the hinges. So we've been down a few trails already where it was hairy. So I appreciate your friendship. I appreciate your dedication to the Lord. It's inspiring to me, and I'm glad that we got a chance to do this. I'm gonna try and wrap it up before we fight Chicago traffic.
There you go. Yeah. Well, I tell you, Matt, and let me tell your listeners too. When I did come out here to the Chicagoland area to go to college, it was a different world, and I don't like to think in what ifs and all that type of stuff, but I don't know if I'd have made it without you being here. We cowboyed a little bit together before, but I didn't get to know you that well while we were cowboying. And after I moved out here, it was shortly after you moved out here, and I always will remember the day you called me, and you were the encouragement and the inspiration I needed, and I think God did all that on purpose. I know He did. You worked on my truck when it was broke down. One thing that I'll never forget, I ran out of fuel in my pickup. It was a diesel truck. Running out of fuel. You drove 2.5 hours just to come help me get my truck started, and turned around and went back. And that always meant the world to me. And there's times where you'd worked on my truck and you replaced a hub, or you've done other things for me, and then I would get back in my truck and there'd be an envelope on my dash with money in it. And I can't tell you your encouragement, what it meant to me, and how it kept me going. And you continue to be. And so I'm so glad you're doing this podcast, because you're using that encouragement that had strengthened me to help strengthen a lot of families out there listening to you. So keep it going, and you guys keep tuning into this podcast, because Matt's going to have a lot of good things for you. I just am so blessed to be on it today, and so blessed to be a part of, be one of Matt's friends and partners. and we've been a lot of miles together, and looking forward to a lot more. So thank you, Matt, for having me here.
You bet, Riley. We talked about this when me and Josh did our podcast deal too. The fact that it's kind of a rarity, or that you take note of it, I think is wrong in the cowboy culture, that I would drive up there and help you with your pickup. You know, if you're not willing to do that for somebody that you cowboy with, don't hang that title on yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the most irritating thing. If you can't cowboy like that, I don't care how good you rope or what you do.
That's right.
Don't call yourself a cowboy. Don't put yourself in a group with the rest of the people that aren't willing to drop, and do whatever they got to do. I mean, that's the most cowboy thing you can do, is unjam one of your partners.
That's right. Yeah. There's nobody that I'd rather have in a wreck with me than Matt, because I know.
Just because I'm slow?
I can outrun him. I know he'll do everything he can to get me out of it. And I tell our boys, we have a saying there on the ranch, and it goes, inconvenience yourself for others. And that's come from my relationship with Matt, learning from him and the way he is around people. He inconveniences himself for others, and that's been one of our mantras there on the ranch, is to inconvenience yourself for other people, and do the job nobody else wants to do. Be the first one to get the gate. Be the just do all the jobs.
Just don't ride in front of everybody.
Just
when
don't
you're doing
ride.
it.
Exactly. Yeah. Use a little cowboy ethics there, but get the job done that nobody else wants to do. And so yeah, Matt, I appreciate all these years. You've always inconvenienced yourself for other people, and you continue to do so, and you inspire me to do the same thing.
I ought to sit down sometime and with guys like you and some other old cowboys and stuff like that. Matt Branham said something to me here the other day. We were out in the arena, and he was talking about what we were just talking about. That for whatever reason, we don't rope kids off of horses anymore when they screw up. Like, when that was going on, like, you learned right away not to ride in front of the boss, that, and you can't hardly fault the kid when nobody's told them, to do it. And you'll see people that'll do that. They'll open the gate and ride through the gate and take off across the pasture while the guy's still trying to get the gate closed behind him. I mean, that is the most no sin, like when you're on a ranch, that you can do. You ride through the gate, you turn around, and you face the gate, and the youngest guy had better be getting the gate. And he had better hustled to be there. And try to, because you're going to have to hustle to beat Riley to get to the gate. He's going to try and beat you. But the youngest guy should get there. He should get the gate. He shouldn't cut the boss off. And then everybody else turns around and watches in case there's a problem or he struggles with the gate or whatever. Just common courtesy until he gets back on his horse. And then we ride off as, a group again. There's so many of them things that we don't teach anybody anymore.
Oh, it is, man. I mean, we're losing it. And I think you and me, we grew up in the wrong generation sometimes, because when I was growing up, like in a branding pen, for instance, when I was growing up, the older men would rope, the young kids would wrestle. And so I was a young kid, so I was always wrestling. And then I couldn't wait till I got to be the older guy so I can rope. Well, then by the time I get to be the older guy, everything changes. And now they have all the kids roping and the older guys wrestling. So I'm still wrestling everywhere I go. So, yeah, it's and that's unfortunate. It shouldn't have
Wrestling
ever
calves ain't that bad if you're partnered right.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
When you're not partnered right, then it turns into wrestling.
Right. But I'll tell you, these kids that are getting put on horses at young age to rope and a branding pen, and they're not learning first how to wrestle, you handle a rope differently when you know how to wrestle.
For a fact.
I promise you. You rope a calf, whether you're heading and heeling or you're just heeling and dragging, you handle your horse and your rope differently if you know how to wrestle something, because you're setting your wrestlers up. And
I give a little grace to dads, because it's not like when we were branding, a 700 head herd wasn't that big of a deal,
Right.
And so, like, there was opportunity with the late bunch or whatever that you wouldn't see, where kids would get to kind of learn how to rope or something like that. It wasn't the big days. The big days, kids ain't roping, but they would get a chance to practice and learn. We just don't have that, so I give dads a little bit of grace, because we've done it. I'm probably to fault a little bit that way. I want my boys to, be able to drag the fire. We just don't have enough cattle. If I take the first 50, we're done.
Right. Yeah, no, our times have changed, all right, that's for sure. But yeah, it's definitely been a little bit different.
Yeah, I should try and do that sometime. Try and figure out a round table and get some guys that have cowboyed and whatnot. That I don't know if I told you or not, but that Scott Jones, who we interviewed him on here, he had a quote, and I think it applies, and I think you could use it on your boys. I don't remember if I told you. I think I probably did, because I found it to be important. But his quote, motto, whatever you want to call it, advice to kids was deserve to win.
Huh.
Put the work in.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if
go.
you win, you win, and if not, you don't. But at least you deserve to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Instead of showing up and thinking that, and whether it's spiritual or in the cowboy world, if you want God to use you, put yourself in the right spot that God can use you.
Yeah.
Deserve it, to be there. And you've done that in both industries, whether it's, in the Christian lifestyle or the cowboy lifestyle. So we'll wrap up here, Riley. I sure appreciate you taking the time to do this. I guess you didn't have a choice other than to jump out while we were moving. So thanks for not jumping out while we were moving, Riley. Although I have seen you try and jump out when you woke up while we were moving. We had to pin you in here, but
I do remember that too.
Anyhow, you're as authentic and as good as they come. Where do people find pictures? Like, you have a website and stuff, and kind of keep up to date with what you've got going on and help support, whether it's through the prayers or they're financially or buying horses or whatever it is. Where do they find you?
Yeah, so you can find us on the web there at rpmranch.org. So you can find us there, and you can also, our world's run by Facebook anymore, and I'm not on it really, but we've got some people that are on our ranch Facebook page, and that's RPM Ranch in Stockton, Missouri, and you can find us there. And kind of keep some updates on what we're doing with the horses. And for instance, we just weaned all our baby colts. We got 33 baby colts that we just weaned, getting ready to halter break, and so kind of keep track of what we've got going on there. But you bet, that's where we can be found. And Matt, thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure. Been a lot of fun to visit with you here over the microphone and talk on some old times.
All right, well, we'll see y'all on the next one here. We'll try and, I always say, I try and get them out a little faster, and it doesn't seem like we do a good job of it, but everybody's busy, so it's not that it's not important to me. It's just trying to pin people down at the same time as like herding cats. So anyhow, I appreciate it, and we'll see y'all at the next rodeo or the next podcast.